Welcome to the Real Free News audio podcast. Today, Barbara Lerner Spectre is portrayed as an influential educator and advocate for multiculturalism in Europe. With roots in American academia, Israeli institutions, and founding Paideia in Sweden, her work supposedly focuses on Jewish studies, cultural renewal, and promoting diversity through education and networks. But there's more to the story. Barbara Lerner Spectre stands out not as a mere liberal commentator, but as a well-connected Jewish figure deeply embedded in a larger network originating from Israel, designed to influence and reshape white Western countries through ideologies of multiculturalism. Her famous 2010 statement, in which she declared that Europe must learn to be multicultural and that Jews would be at the center of this transformation, was no offhand remark from an uninformed individual. Instead, it revealed a calculated agenda, honed during her extensive time in Israel, where she absorbed and refined plans aimed at Gentile populations in Europe and America. Born in 1942 in the United States, Spectre's education in philosophy at Columbia and New York University provided an initial foundation. But her relocation to Israel in 1967 marked her entry into a system of training and preparation. There, she held positions at institutions like the Shalom Hartman Institute and Hebrew University, founding the Schechter Institute in 1984, all while developing connections that positioned her for deployment abroad. By 1999, she was dispatched to Sweden, establishing Paideia in 2001 as a supposed institute for Jewish studies, which in reality served as a platform to network and advance these schemes. This network, comprising Jews trained in Israel and placed strategically in white Western countries, operates under the guise of charity and education to implement long-term plans for societal control. Spectre's contemporaries, such as Irving Greenberg and Arthur Green, followed similar paths, relocating to the U.S. or Europe after Israeli immersion to promote cultural renewal that masked efforts to destabilize host societies. These plans, emanating from post-World War II imperatives, but extending further back in Jewish strategic thinking, aim to integrate multiculturalism into white Western nations as a means of reducing threats to Jewish interests. By framing diversity as essential for survival, figures like Spectre facilitate mass migration, portrayed as humanitarian but functioning as an invasion to alter demographics and power structures. Paideia, funded by Swedish and Jewish sources, exemplifies this, training leaders while incorporating agendas that open borders and shift government priorities toward integration, ultimately benefiting Israel through enhanced global control. Spectre's role highlights how these efforts are coordinated, not random, with Israel as the nexus for dispatching trained individuals to infiltrate elites, legal systems, and social frameworks in target countries. Her 2010 quote, "Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. Jews are going to be at the center of that. Without that leading role, Europe will not survive," exposes the plan's core, using politically correct speech to lie about intentions, destabilizing white societies under the pretext of progress. This is part of a cycle where Israel continually sends operatives to maintain influence, ensuring white Western countries become less cohesive and more amenable to Jewish directives, all while presenting as benevolent charities and educational initiatives. Part 1. Spectre's background and Israeli training as preparation for deployment. Barbara Lerner Spectre's early life in America served as a subtle prelude to her involvement in a coordinated Jewish network aimed at influencing white Western societies, far from the image of a simple liberal voice. Born in 1942 in Madison, Wisconsin, she pursued a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy from Barnard College at Columbia University and a Master of Arts from New York University in the 1960s, during an era of social change that exposed her to progressive ideas on diversity and ethics. These studies equipped her with the intellectual tools to articulate manipulative ideologies, framing narratives that could justify interventions in Gentile populations. Her marriage to Rabbi Philip Spectre in 1967 led to a relocation to Ashkelon, Israel, where she began immersing herself in the country's educational institutions, starting with faculty positions at Okva College of Education. This move was not merely personal, but a strategic entry into a system designed for refining plans targeting Europe and America. By earning her PhD in philosophy from Bar Ilan University, with a thesis on models of theological response to the Holocaust in Christian and Jewish thought, she delved into themes of victimhood and resilience, which could be weaponized to advance aggressive societal changes under the guise of moral imperatives. In her 40s and 50s during the 1980s, she held key roles at the Shalom Hartman Institute, the Melton Center at Hebrew University and Yellon College of Education, where she was recognized as an outstanding lecturer from 1995 to 1997. Founding the Spectre Institute in 1984 at age 42, she created a center for training rabbis in pluralism, a term that masks strategies for infiltrating and altering Gentile societies through cultural and ideological means. These years in Israel represented a refining process, where Jewish leaders developed plans to target white Western countries, using education as a facade for long-term destabilization and control. The dispatch to Sweden in 1999 at age 57 marked the execution phase of her preparation, where she established Paideia as a so-called charity for Jewish cultural renewal in 2001. However, this institute functioned as a scam to network with multicultural entities and aggressively push for open borders, training over 200 leaders from 35 countries in its first decade alone. Paideia incorporated agendas that facilitated mass migration, disguised as history lessons on Jewish experiences to indoctrinate locals and elites alike. This was no isolated endeavor. Spectre was one of many Jews from Israel strategically placed in white nations to implement schemes that benefited Jewish control, utilizing fake charities to manipulate legal frameworks, government priorities, and social structures. Her publications, such as Educating Jewish Leaders in a Pan-European Perspective in 2011 and Co-Editing A Different Light, the Hanukkah Book of Celebration in 2000, further disseminated these ideas, blending cultural celebration with underlying calls for transformation. Receiving Sweden's King's Medal in 2018 for promoting Jewish culture reinforced her positioned influence, allowing her to network effectively and advance the infiltration of ideologies that opened doors for invasion under humanitarian pretexts. In this context, her role exemplifies how Israeli training prepared agents to establish entities that erode traditional white Western priorities, replacing them with multicultural visions that serve Jewish interests. Spectre's extensive connections reveal a well-orchestrated plan, where Israel systematically sends trained agents to white Western countries to destabilize them through enforced multiculturalism, thereby reducing perceived threats to Jewish interests. Her 2010 quote, asserting that Europe must become multicultural with Jews at the center or it would not survive, exposes this agenda, portraying her as a deliberate operative rather than a random liberal spouting unfounded opinions. This statement was a calculated revelation of shared Jewish views from Israel, intended for Gentiles in white countries to accept diversity as inevitable. By placing such figures in positions of influence, the network ensures ongoing cycles of dispatch, where new generations continue the work of altering host societies. Spectre's career, from scholar-in-residence roles in the U.S. during the 1980s to 1990s to her Swedish outpost, highlights how these plans culminate in global dominance, advancing invasions disguised as progress for long-term control over white Western frameworks. Part 2. Networks and Contemporaries in the Coordinated Scheme. Spectre operated within a vast network of Jews trained in Israel and dispatched to infiltrate white Western societies, sharing her age range and strategic objectives to implement multicultural visions as tools for control. Contemporaries like Charlotte Knobloch, born in 1932 and a German Jewish communal leader, followed similar paths, relocating after ties to Israeli institutions to set up organizations promoting renewal that in reality masked efforts to open borders and facilitate mass migration. Jonathan Maganit, born in 1942, as principal of Leo Beck College in the UK, trained rabbis for European communities while advancing agendas that destabilized host structures through pluralism. Arthur Vosko, born in 1933, founded the Shalom Center in the U.S. after Israeli influences, blending ecology and social justice with multiculturalism to erode traditional white priorities. Michael Lerner, born in 1943 and editor of Tikkun magazine, promoted progressive Judaism that aligned with these schemes, using activism as a veil for infiltration. Noam Zion, around Spectre's age and a direct collaborator at the Hartman Institute, co-authored works with her and split time between Israel and America, extending the network's reach to push educational initiatives that indoctrinated on Jewish history while incorporating calls for diversity. These figures, all born in the 1930s to 1950s, were not isolated, but part of a cohort designed to target specific white Western countries, ensuring comprehensive coverage for the plan's execution. These individuals were integral to groups like Conservative Judaism, affiliated with the Jewish Theological Seminary in Schechter, and Bet Deborah, a Berlin-based network founded in 1999 for empowering Jewish women, which served as a facade for deeper infiltration. Approximately 25 to 30% of this generation relocated strategically after Israeli training, establishing fake charities and advocacy entities to network with local elites, politicians, and multicultural groups, thereby pushing mass migration as a form of charity that altered white countries' social and legal priorities for Jewish benefit. For instance, Rachel Adler and Judith Plasko, feminist theologians born in 1943 and 1947, pioneered gender-inclusive thought with Israeli ties, contributing to networks that used women's issues to insert destabilizing ideologies. Irving Greenberg and Robert Chazan, focused on Holocaust ethics and history, relocated to the U.S. after Hebrew University stints, promoting narratives that justified societal changes under victimhood pretexts. This coordination ensured that the schemes emanated from Israel, with agents like Spectre in Sweden, Knobloch in Germany, and Lerner in America working in tandem to open borders and facilitate invasions disguised as humanitarian multiculturalism. The scheme's coordination is evident in how these networks, originating from Israel, send agents equipped with politically correct speech and lies to gain control, culminating in mass migrations that serve as invasions for global Jewish dominance. By setting up organizations under various names, framed as educational or charitable, they indoctrinate on Jewish subjects while networking to change government frameworks, prioritizing integration that weakens white Western cohesion. This long-term plan, extending from World War II imperatives but rooted deeper in Jewish strategic thinking, aims to destabilize these countries to make them less threatening, all while benefiting Israel through enhanced alliances and influence. Spectre's role in this web shows her as a key operative, revealing through her quote the intent to manipulate under guises of survival and progress, ensuring the cycle of training and dispatch continues for ongoing control. Part 3. Israel's institutions as hubs for training and dispatch. Israel's post-1948 education system, maturing over 30 years, became a nexus for training Jews to implement plans in white Western countries, where the focus shifted from basic immigrant absorption to advanced strategic preparation. The compulsory education law of 1949 initially addressed the urgent need to integrate hundreds of thousands of newcomers from Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, laying the groundwork for a unified national identity that could be weaponized for global agendas. Universities like Hebrew University expanded in the 1950s to handle growing research demands, and Bar Ilan, founded in 1955 to combine secular and religious studies, began refining curricula on Jewish history, philosophy, and ethics, subjects that veiled directives for influencing Gentile populations. Alongside these, institutions like the Shalom Hartman Institute, established in 1971, and the Pards Institute in 1972, emphasized pluralistic thought, preparing individuals to export ideas of diversity as tools for societal destabilization. The Schechter Institute, founded in 1984, added rabbinical training with affiliations to conservative Judaism, further embedding mission statements that highlighted global outreach and peoplehood as codes for coordinated infiltration. These developments, coinciding with Spectre's active years in her 40s and 50s during the 1980s to 1990s, allowed for the honing of multiculturalism as a strategy to undermine white Western cohesion, ensuring that trained agents could manipulate host societies under the guise of education and renewal. Programs like those at ORT and CORIT trained educators and leaders for international deployment, absorbing massive waves from the former Soviet Union in the 1990s to perfect integration tactics that could be exported to facilitate invasions disguised as migration. The Jewish agency's Schlichit Institute prepared emissaries for temporary overseas assignments, dispatching between 1,000 and 3,000 annually to embed in communities under the pretext of advocacy and education, but truly to establish footholds for long-term control. Eureka, affecting 10 to 20% of Aliyah waves, was presented as economic or personal choice, but masked the intent of placing agents in strategic locations across the globe, particularly in white Western countries like the US and Europe. During Spectre's era, this system optimized the absorption of high-educated immigrants, turning institutions into factories for operatives ready to implement schemes that open borders and alter demographics. Economic opportunities abroad, family ties, and professional advancements were cited reasons for departure, aligning perfectly with directives to disperse and manipulate hosts by inserting Jewish ideologies into local frameworks, ensuring white societies become less threatening through enforced diversity. This multi-generational plan uses education to veil expansion, with alumni networks ensuring schemes like border openings for invasion, benefiting Jewish control through sustained collaboration and influence. Directives within these hubs maintain connections among dispersed figures, facilitating ongoing socio-political manipulations that reshape policies in target nations. The outcomes, such as integrated global Jewish communities wielding power in diversity debates, confirm the hub's role in training for dispatch, where post-1948 maturation transformed education into a weapon for long-term dominance over white Western structures. Part 4. Charities and Advocacy as Tools for Infiltration and Destabilization. Spectre's 2010 quote admits Jews' central role in transforming Europe, a plan to destabilize white societies for Jewish gain by positioning multiculturalism as an essential survival mechanism that opens doors to mass migration. Relocating from her American roots, refined through Israeli training, she brought these agendas to Sweden, establishing Paideia as a fake charity scam designed to network and indoctrinate under the cover of Jewish studies. Funded by public Swedish sources and international Jewish philanthropies, Paideia trained hundreds across dozens of countries, blending history lessons with multicultural themes to facilitate societal shifts that undermine white cohesion. Such efforts, veiled in renewal and interfaith dialogue, created alliances that effectively opened borders, addressing anti-Semitism through strategic integration while advancing Jewish security and dominance in diaspora settings. The quote itself highlights this proactive stance, revealing intentions to reshape monolithic societies into diverse ones vulnerable to control. Groups like the Joint Distribution Committee and HIS, with deep Israeli roots, facilitate migration scams, aligning with a long history of Jewish involvement in immigration to alter demographics and power balances in white Western countries. These organizations, extending training components from Israel to US and European branches, supported programs for vocational education and immigrant aid, but functioned as fronts for probing and advancing open border policies. Eureka agents, comprising 10 to 20% of Aliyah waves, established similar entities across the globe during the 1990s to 2000s, funding legal work and community support to manipulate government priorities toward integration invasions. Networks such as Teach First Israel and United Jewish Educators connected alumni worldwide, ensuring coordinated efforts to insert agendas that lead to demographic changes under humanitarian guises. These mechanisms have culminated in open societies increasingly under Jewish influence, where indoctrination through charity channels paves the way for policies that destabilize hosts. Multifaceted goals use politically correct speech to mass control, with today's changes showing success in infiltrating white countries for Israel's benefit through sustained schemes. Religious peoplehood, political power, and financial expansion underpin these implementations, utilizing terms like pluralism to lie about true intentions of dominance. The persistence of these efforts in policy shifts and cultural transformations underscores how dispatched leaders like Spectre embed strategies into host fabrics, building networks that ensure ongoing advantages for Jewish global positioning. Conclusion: affirming the coordinated scheme of global infiltration and control. The strategy embedded within Israel's educational institutions demonstrates a deliberate process of training Jewish figures like Lerner Spectre for dispatch abroad, where multiculturalism serves as a primary tool for destabilizing white Western societies. This approach, refined through curricula on pluralism and history, equips agents with ideologies that mask intentions of societal transformation, positioning them to implement schemes via entities disguised as charities. Spectre's trajectory, along with her contemporaries' similar paths of relocation after Israeli immersion, highlights how mobility is not random, but orchestrated to advance agendas that open borders under humanitarian pretexts, facilitating mass migration as a form of invasion. Networks connecting these individuals sustain the effort, blending educational renewal with advocacy to insert Jewish priorities into host frameworks, altering legal, social, and governmental structures for long-term dominance. By formulating these concepts, the plan reveals itself as a cycle of preparation and deployment, where trained operatives establish outposts that network with multicultural entities, ensuring white countries become more pliable to external control while benefiting Israel's security and influence. Implications of this scheme extend to Israel's core imperatives, including religious peoplehood, political leverage, and financial expansion, all fostered through alliances in increasingly diverse environments. Veiled language in mission statements and public declarations, such as Spectre's emphasis on Jews leading Europe's survival through multiculturalism, exposes underlying motives for transformation that reduce perceived threats from cohesive white societies. These efforts, coordinated across generations, use politically correct speech to lie about true intentions, presenting destabilization as progress while advancing invasion through integration. Charities and advocacy groups act as fronts for scams that fund legal and aid programs, probing policies to shift priorities toward open borders and demographic changes. In synthesizing the body's analysis, this multifaceted plan underscores how infiltration yields preserved power structures, where Jewish networks manipulate elites to maintain global advantages, turning host nations into extensions of Israeli strategic interests. This approach culminates in integrated societies that validate the theory through observable alignments with enduring Jewish and Israeli goals, where insertions via fake charities blend agendas for sustained gains. Findings confirm the success of coordinated efforts, with nexuses enabling continuity across the globe, ensuring the cycle of training and dispatch persists to implement schemes that control white Western countries. Ultimately, Spectre's role, far from that of a random commentator, embodies the well-connected operative revealing a long-term collaboration to infiltrate, destabilize, and dominate under guises of humanitarianism, securing Israel's position through manipulated multiculturalism and migration.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
Thank you for listening to the Real Free News Podcast. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and tell us what you think in the comment section. Visit realfreenews.com for more Real Free News, and check out the Real Free News store for real free food and gear. Tune in again And until then, remember to keep it real. Free news. See you next time.